You know, how do you find hope to carry on when you feel like a loved one or maybe yourself is just too far gone? Well, in her new book, King Here, Olympian Trish Porter Topmiller opens up about why you're never too anything to meet Jesus. Trish, welcome. We're so happy to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Trish, this the book is really starts with your story. That's why God had you write this book. And I'd like to give you an opportunity just to share how you came to know the Lord as your Savior.
Well, I just graduated from high school, and I really didn't know what I was going to do, whether I was going to go to college or not. And so I ended up going to see my aunt and uncle, who were in a little cabin, 500-square-foot cabin in the woods. And there that night, I prayed, God, I don't know what to do. Help me. And the next day, my aunt and uncle started sharing about Jesus Christ to me. And they asked if I wanted to accept him and receive him into my life. And I said, yes, I want to do that. I kind of did it the night before, but yes. And so we prayed right then and there. And that changed my life. I went to college.
Surely did. Surely did.
And then, Trish, you became an Olympian. Tell us a little bit about your journey in the Olympics.
Yes, I was on the 1988 Olympic team in the high jump. And at the Olympics, I met my future husband, Pat Porter, who is a two-time Olympian in track and field and a 10,000-meter distance runner.
As an athlete, I think you probably would have been similar to how I was as an achiever. And how were you able to not translate that into your relationship with God, that it was all God's grace?
Well, I think because I had a year where I did not do well competing, and so we tend to base who we are on our successes, but God really said, no, this is who you are is based on who I think you are.
Right.
And so no matter what, I'm a child of God. No matter what, he loves me. No matter what, he died for me. And so I really learned that, I think, a lot the year where I did not compete well.
And just hearing about like your faith and how God solidified that was so important, because as you write in King Here in your book, there's a lot of things that happened, a lot of pain and things that you walked through in your life that you had to hold on to that saving power of Jesus Christ.
Yes, I think for me, one of the turning points was my daughter. I had a 15-year-old son, Connor, who was a U.S. medalist in fencing, and I have a daughter who's a figure skater, competitive figure skater. And one day we were driving, we were training in Colorado Springs for figure skating, and we were driving back to Albuquerque. And there on the way home, it was going to be the Olympics the next day. The opening ceremonies were starting. So I often do TV interviews or radio interviews, and that's why I was headed home. And I get a call on my phone from Channel 13, the TV station, and I think, ooh, it's going to be a busy couple days. I got another interview. And I pick up the phone, and there I hear a lady say, can you please confirm that your husband, Pat Porter's plane went down in Sedona, Arizona? So at that moment, my world was shattered. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't think, so I pulled the car over, and I got in the back of my car with my daughter, and we prayed. We prayed they'd be alive, but I knew that wasn't the case. I knew at that moment I lost half my family. I lost my guys, my husband of 20 years, and my 15-year-old son, along with my son's friend, Connor. So the two Connors perished in a plane accident that my husband was the pilot of.
When I first got called up to the big leagues, one of the players that took me under his wing was Andre Thornton. And I loved this man. He was our cleanup hitter, our first baseman. That Christmas time, right out here in Somerset, in our area, they were coming back. The family lived in Chester, Pennsylvania, his family, and they were going back to Cleveland. Got in the snow, the van overturned. His daughter and his wife were killed. The next spring, the first day of spring training, I remember seeing a sign that we were going to be having a Bible study. And I wondered, well, who is going to be the new chapel coordinator? Surely not him. I just never considered that as an option. I will never forget knocking on the door in that hotel, Sheraton Pueblo, and having Andre answer the phone and say, welcome, Tom. Welcome, Tom. In your life, God took this extraordinary tragedy, but he turned it into something special and a platform for you to be able to testify to your faith.
He did. And I think, for me, you think, how can I survive this? How can I survive with, my guys were my laughter, they were our strength, they were our fun.
Right.
But I had a friend who told me, as life is crazy, as your right hand is going all over the place, take your left hand up like you're going to pray, and then bring your right hand up and say, I trust you, God. I trust you, God.
Oh my.
And that was what I stood on. That's what got me through those days, was I trust you, Lord. And I just clung to that. I clung to that. And that first night after the accident, I was in bed with my daughter, Shannon. We slept together just because of the pain. And she says, in the middle of the night, she says, Mom, I know they're in heaven. I know they're in a better place. And I know we'll see them again because they love Jesus. And so that was the other thing we could cling to, was what a gift they gave us. I never thought of it that way. They gave us a gift because they knew Jesus. Then we knew we could see them again someday. Because we never know when our time is up.
We don't. We don't.
And speaking of that trust, Trish, is that you had to trust God even when it came to your father. You write about his life and, the successes he's had, but you had a real burden on your heart for his salvation. Can you tell us about that?
I did. After I accepted the Lord, I learned a little bit about, I learned about Jesus and the 4 spiritual laws, and I would try and share with him and talk about how Jesus is the bridge to heaven, and he wanted nothing to do with it. He did not want to hear anything. Really, he was very successful, a multimillionaire who believed his financial fortress was invincible, and he had no need for God. He even once looked at me and said, if I lost half my money, I'd still be rich. But little did he know, what was going to happen down the road. And so he was a lot of fun. He loved adventures. I say some of my favorite adventures were, we would take ride our Harleys to Sturgis, South Dakota.
Oh my goodness.
And he once took a date. He flew them on a private jet from San Francisco to LA, so they could have a date to go on the Goodyear blimp for dinner, flying over the city lights of Los Angeles. I know. He went around the world in 26 days on the Concorde, which is a supersonic jet. So he was a big man. He was kind of a large man in some sense. He wasn't about things, but he, again, lived big, but had no need for God.
How important is patience? How important was that gift of patience that God gave you in just continuing and steadfastly witnessing?
I think those around me would say I'm not very patient.
Hey, who is?
In honesty, I really haven't. But it's that consistent, persistent prayer, I think, that we don't give up. I think, they would never come to know Jesus. This person, they'll never.
That's right.
And who am I? Who am I to decide who can come to know the Lord or not? We need to be faithful, and we need to be proactive in sharing our faith and being continual and praying.
And Trish, why did you give up on your dad? Because I think that, sometimes you're like, okay, your dad would reject and be like, oh, I'm not so sure about, this, or you guys would push and push. But why did you feel like such a drive to be like, I really, need to just contend and believe for my father to know Jesus?
I think because, we all, I want to be with him someday in heaven. We want our family there with us. And so that's what kept me going is I just didn't want to give up. I just didn't want to give up. But I knew there was a part of me that felt like I wasn't going to be the one who could help him with his salvation because I was so close in some sense.
What was the difference maker? You had shared over many, many years. What was the difference maker that allowed that light to shine in his life?
Well, I think my brother also didn't give up. So he finally agreed to go to church. Okay, and there in the front row, or in the second row, was an angel. His name was Michael.
Thank you.
His name was Michael. And he was praising and worshiping God with his whole being. And my dad was inexplicably drawn to him, which I find interesting because I think for someone who doesn't know the Lord, if you see someone raising their hands in worship, and especially if you're 82 years old, you aren't drawn to that person typically. You're kind of like, whew. And my dad was inexplicably drawn to him. And then in sweetness, I ended up meeting another man 4 years later after I lost my husband. And I met a man, James, who loves the Lord. And it was just such a God story. On our first date, we had a double rainbow over the restaurant
Well,
that we were going to.
Oh, no.
But the double rainbow had meaning for me. Out of the plane accident crash site on the next day was a double rainbow coming out of the accident site. And then on my son, what would have been his 16th birthday, I had a big party for all in a pool party for him and his friends. And there, over where we did the ashes on the mountain, Bear Canyon, was a rainbow. Nice. And so I felt this double rainbow for my first date with James was for me, and that our date was off to a good start. So really, that was the beginning of the difference, because James was a businessman, very successful businessman, and so my dad could respect him, but he also had lost his wife, and so he knew loss, and my dad couldn't say to him, well, you don't understand how I feel, you don't understand my pain, because he did know.
He could.
And so James was really the person who then intentionally, I thought, James, you need to share Jesus with my dad. You need to share Jesus. It's got to be you. And so we started to pray for that.
Thank you, God.
And he took the steps by having a Bible study, studying his Bible one day in my dad's house. And that was the beginning of it.
How powerful.
Yeah, we know there's so much more. We're going to dig deeper into your story, Trish, right after the break. But right now, we're going to head over